Hello, sisters. Um, yeah, so I'm just gonna read and talk as usual. The the title says 10 to 14 and the thumbnail says 10 to 12. I'm not sure how many chapters I'm gonna get through. Also, I guess I'll say it when there's more people here, but more women here. I've scheduled the next one, so if you're not getting notifications, set reminder for the next one. It's on my YouTube channel right now. Okay. This chair feels really random. Mama, come baby. She's like, what? Alrighty. All two of you are here. All three of you are here. Okay, we're on page 60. All right. Part 2. Enemies within. Workers of all countries unite in peacetime, but in war, slit one another's throats. Rosa Luxemburg. Chapter 10. I courted her with pints of chocolate Haagen-Dazs and lines from Calderón de la Barca. ¿Qué es la vida? Un frenesí. ¿Qué es la vida? Una ilusión. ¿Qué es hombre? Una ficción. What is life? A frenzy. What is life? An illusion, a shadow, a lie. I took her to Catherine's, where we gave a command performance as the sextets. Once, I recited a litany of all the places I'd stayed after the shaving performance when the Colombians kicked me out of their Rego Park apartments. There was the house in Long Island, packed with South Asians that I came to by way of a Filipino woman from performance studies. Then there was a house sitting gig in Flatbush where a bunch of young black men surrounded me on the train once and asking, "Happy about Bensonhurst, you racist skinhead?" Until one guy finally said, "It's just her do, man," like that singer, and they moved off reluctantly. Then the sublet in Park Slope. Then a retreat in Cincinnati. Then back for a studio on Soho's Grand Street. And a room in Astoria with a Basque Puerto Rican dyke who taught me how to make pasta. Then a share in Harlem with a heterosexual Bengali poet who dated an ex boxer, drank nothing but scotch, and made me dinner in exchange for the Marlboros I got as a perk for temping at Philip Morris when I fortuitously met Marie. Then an illegal hostel in a West Village brownstone run by a Dubliner dyke before Ireland itself, where for a month I was the first out dyke everybody's parents met. Then an all Hispanic building in Williamsburg, infested with rats so big they only left paw prints on the glue traps. Finally, Avenue B. I still thought it was an adventure, all those worlds I'd passed through. My around the world trip in 690 days. Though maybe when I told her those stories, I was hedging my bets again, offering a warning that I was a rolling stone, wouldn't last. Anna's friends, too, were skeptical. Maybe because I was quite a bit younger than her, and had no roots. Anna herself told me. I keep waiting for a shoe to drop, first one, then the other. But the relationship took, like an unexpected graft. Anna even stayed sometimes in the loft, pushing Audre Lorde and HD and Artaud off my mattress to sweet to sweat in solidarity, though her bedroom 8 blocks away was cold with air conditioning and complete with a real bed, real walls, a door, and a son in the room across the hall who departed from the story as quickly as possible. There was an ailanthus in the backyard. You could hear it rustling in the wind like a jungle creature. When it rained, the heavy green leaves pressed up against the window. I discovered bright red lipstick in Anna's medicine cabinet. We talked sprawled out on her living room floor because there was no couch until I demanded it years later. And if you didn't want tetanus, you'd avoid the chairs around the table that were made of skins and twigs and rusty nails. There wasn't much besides that but a piano in a niche, tons of plants, and a few paintings. The empty space was handy for rehearsals, she said, and meetings. Delivery guys asked if it was a dance studio. and we would sometimes turn on the music and fling ourselves around the room. I did a mean rendition of Isadora Duncan, trapped by her own scarf. We told each other all of our stories. I'd go off on my mom, who was occasionally joyful but mostly ranted and raved, all strung out on Jesus and tranks and gallons of Maxwell House, instant brewed in the dangerous cup. Then it was my multiply married sisters, and my father, who was barely there, working out of town when we were kids, and after the divorce was such a schmuck about that tumor thing. But I also told her about the summer after college that Heather and I went to her mother's farm in northern Kentucky, and I had to kill hornets in the attic and replace panes of glass. There was a garden with basil, purple basil, lemon balm, oregano, pepper, squash, and corn. In the heat, the fragrance of the herbs rose up to the house where we slept, with old sheer curtains pulled up over us to keep off the ticks and mosquitoes. In the mornings, fog covered the mountains. I churned out poems. Once, I went upstairs to write. There was 5-foot snake draped over the baseboard. I read a poem to it about Moses and snakes and God's rod. It listened, then slithered away. And Anna, at first, told churning, innocuous tales about her hometown in Cienfuegos, Cuba, and the nuns at school who made the little girls wear wool socks even in the tropical heat, and how she'd gum up her sewing exercises with her sweaty little fingers and bring them home for her grandma to fix. She said she was never very good at crafty things like that, but I figured the problem was simpler. If she didn't learn, she'd never have to do it. Still, she admired the nuns. They were from Philadelphia, sweating, red faced, and independent. If something difficult needed doing, like lifting a heavy record player or a film projector, they rolled up their sleeves and did it themselves. They didn't bullshit, weren't ashamed of being smart. They taught the girls English along with the hokey pokey. Put your right foot in, put your right foot out. Though when the electricity went out, they declared such a thing would never happen in Philadelphia. A colonialism light that fed an ambivalence in Anna that would bug her later. On the other hand, they were right, she said. Pennsylvania wasn't known for its blackouts. By the time we met, her grandmother lived in Queens with Anna's mother, with one brother not far away and another safely in France. I learned that her grandmother and mother had both been grade school teachers and never took to cooking or cleaning, which was why Anna ate raw tofu and bananas standing in her kitchen, or whipped out a credit card for restaurants that didn't that actually had wine lists. It excited me. 3 generations out of the kitchen. Yeah, Matt Adams says 2 viewers, so you might be. Oh no, now it says three. You might have been the only one for a bit there. Uh, I just realized I think somebody else is doing a premiere right now, so that might be why. But whatever. I need to wake up really early tomorrow morning, so I have to start now, or else I could only do it for like half an hour. Okay. Um. Okay. Anna took me to her tiny cabin in the Catskills, where we ripped each other's clothes off and rolled around on the floor until my skin started stinging from what we discovered were horrible little ants, and proceedings were discontinued for extermination. After night fell and the yellow moon came out, we went for a walk up the dirt road that climbed a rib of Scotch Mountain. And she told me about moving to Havana with her grandmother, only the two of them, right before the end of the revolution in '58. Afterwards, a young soldier just down from Sierra Maestra taught all the neighborhood kids how to make Molotov cocktails. Later on, the high school took students on marches, sometimes at night when they could barely see a thing. Girls were suddenly allowed to do everything, not like in Cienfuegos, when she'd fought with her parents who wanted to keep her under lock and key. She whispered in the shadows, quote, "You'd walk with an arm outstretched to touch a person in front of you, like this, and then the one behind you would do the same. No talking," end quote. She pushed me in front of her the length of her arm, and we walked in silence, stumbling over stones in the dark. When I giggled, she shushed me sternly and whispered soldiering tips. Quote, "If you pause for a rest, never take your boots off because your feet swell and you can't get them back on," end quote. "Let's just go back, I'm tired, just a little bit further." Anna was smaller than the others and worked hard to prove herself. When she could, she took a crash course in journalism, got a gig at a newspaper. After work, she'd put up with a bunch of teenagers who had started a publishing projection, Edición El Puente. Jose Mario was the Pied Piper attracting all the talent. He'd roped her in as a co-director. She did some editing, but also managed the grunt work, making sure deadlines were met and typesetters got clean proofs. They published chapbooks and held readings and performances that were dangerously popular. She showed me a photo once of four of the crew standing in front of the print shop in Old Havana. Jose Mario was smiling at something off to the side, slick in his pressed white shirt, with his dark hair falling daringly past his ears. He was the oldest at 19 or 20. Ana Justina was a plump black poet with a sweater draped around her shoulders and her arms stuffed with papers and books. Gerardo, an Afro-Cuban guy, was posing with each thumb hanging through the belt loop, satisfied with the world and his own literary revolution. His shoes showed a high shine even in this faded sepia print. Anna was the most restrained, staring stiffly into the camera, all femmed up in pointy heels and a sweater set. I didn't recognize that young girl at first. Something essential about her face had changed. Even now, when I see the picture, I wonder who she is. Then I remember. Anna, it's Anna. And I want to reach out and touch the side of her face. I have to say, Matt Adams says she appreciates that I pronounce non English words as properly as possible. Yeah, I try because I hate when people do that with French, when they pronounce it like, or even when Americans, when they say like I ran or something, I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Because other Americans say it that way. That's the right way to say it. That's not how the world works, bro. It's not about you. Yeah. Um, so I don't know. I like that she like goes into the backstory of people. Like obviously that's cool, and that she explains where people come from and that kind of stuff. I just feel like yes, Quebec, exactly, Comutaccio. Also, hello, Comutaccio. I just feel like it's not very clear as I'm reading it. Like I have to kind of stop and think for a second and be like, okay, where in the timeline does this fit? Because she doesn't like start the paragraph or end the paragraph by saying like, it's supposed to be this, like this is what happened before that, or like, yo, so we're talking about 1993. This was what happened in 1960. You know what I mean? I feel like she's not really like setting up the timeline very well. I don't like that. Um, Yuna Vermea, what is your nickname? What is the proper pronunciation of your nickname? Because I'll try and do it better if I'm not doing it properly. Um, Hello, Turvin. Okay. So we're in Havana, at least for like a few pages. That was interesting. Also, like, I don't know. Spanish isn't that hard to pronounce. I don't know, like, just fucking try. Okay. Um, Last night at the party, I was yeah, Madam says, and yeah, I get a little confused about what's going on narratively occasionally. Yeah, exactly. Like it's not that she's like bad at storytelling or whatever. It's just a little bit more you can call me Blood Moon or Red Moon if it's easier for you though. Oh, maybe. I'll probably forget though. Uh yeah. Yeah. Okay. When she told me what happened, we were sitting in bed, leaning back against the smooth dark wood of the headboard. What it happened? I feel again, it's like I don't know. It's like she's trying to build suspense or something, but it actually sometimes feels like I just don't know what's going on rather than being like, "Oh shit," Like I don't know. Do you know what I mean? Okay. When she told me what happened, we were sitting in bed, leaning back against the smooth dark wall of the headboard. Yellow light arrived in bars through the window blinds. Our bodies seemed dark against the cream of the twisted sheets. This was the gist of it. That some goon from state security grabbed her from her apartment and took her to jail. At first, they stuck her in the general population, which was mostly poor white women, busted for illegal abortions or squatting in abandoned houses. Then they moved her to a smaller cell packed with murderers, thieves, and a nutcase. Most of them were black, all seemingly dykes. It was supposed to be an object lesson. Quote, keep associating with counter revolutionary degenerates. That's where you'll end up for good, end quote. It stunk of urine, sweat, damp stone, and bloody rags. The women stared at her from their overcrowded bunks. The only space left in the cell was a foot or two by the bars, where she was supposed to put her mattress. When night fell, Anna burst into tears, but a middle aged black woman told her not to worry. Quote, The girls are just silly. They won't hurt you. You'll be out soon. End quote. Not like her. She was doing 25 to life for killing a man, though her girlfriend still visited her. 2 or 3 times, guards fetched her in the middle of the night and marched her to a brightly lit office where she was interrogated by a military officer who laid his big pistol on the desk while he fingered her through teenage diaries and demanded to know who was queer. While he fingered her through her teenage. Well, he fingered through her teenage diaries. Okay, I am under the impression that this happened in Cuba. It wasn't clear to me because it, the way this is written, it sounds like they're sitting on the bed, and then Anna is telling um, Kelly, "This is what happened to me today." That's how it sounded to me. This is not what happened to her today. This is what happened to her like years ago before she got to America. Okay, a little bit annoying that they wrote it that way. Okay, okay. Uh, yeah, and that they had her diaries and they were trying to figure out who was, well, they say queer here. I don't know which word. If the cops were using that word in the 60s, I'm pretty sure it was in a derogatory way. Hello, Pinwheel. Hello, Ella. Yeah, Mad Adam is exactly what I mean. She's like, it's true, it's nice to have the setting and people described so deeply, definitely fleshes the world out. But I'm like, wait, what was the last thing that happened? Where is she? Yeah. And like, as someone who reads a lot of fiction, who's used to narratives, and like, I've even read like some postmodern fiction where there's like not really a timeline. And I don't know, this just seems like a little bit awkward. Okay. 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 So they looked through her diaries and they were trying to, in the middle of the night, the military police were demanding to know who are the queers. This was after she started writing for the paper. Well, I'm assuming that based on what I can see in the next paragraph. Okay. Quote, tell me about Gerardo, Nancy, Jose Mario, that Rimbaud you write so much about, end quote. Anna herself had a boyfriend and never really considered the others. Suddenly, a lot made sense. The cryptic comments and the giggles. She kept mum, or defended them. Then it was back to the cells and more mind games. A guard would wake her up and force her to march through the serpentine halls of the old Spanish fort. He kept behind her and ordered her not to turn around. Sometimes he'd pause for no reason, then resume. She waited to be put against the wall and shot. I couldn't listen properly. I remember looking at the curve of her arm, the flesh of her rounded belly, and the muscular shoulders. I held her hand. It seemed like a story we'd have read in women's studies class back in Kentucky, the classic third world woman's nightmare that poet Carolyn Forche described. Anna's voice seemed more and more distant. She told me the big purges happened a year later. She'd been arrested early because of her mother. Things had been okay as long as Anna was alone in Havana with her grandmother. But when her mother came from Cienfuegos, the battles around the little girls, the battles resumed about what the girls could and couldn't do, especially with young men. Gerardo used to walk her home sometimes, and two dyke neighbors spread the rumor that she was pregnant with his black baby. Why? Why? Don't be an asshole to other women. Why? It doesn't help you in any way. Don't do that. Like, why? Okay. Um, she was also too close to the flamboyant Jose Mario. And in fury, anger, and shame, Anna's mother went everywhere complaining about her unruly underage daughter and her degenerate friends. Again, why? Like, okay, think about it from the mother's perspective. Okay, I'm the mother, right? I have this daughter who is like being a revolutionary and hanging out with like the queers and like is having a boyfriend, and there's a rumor that she's pregnant. What will it accomplish for me to go talking to people and be like, yeah, my daughter's a slut or a bitch or whatever? Like, what? You're just spreading the word around more? Or you're like making it look like you're worse of a mother than people might have assumed you. Like, I don't understand how, like, what. I don't understand the women who do these kind of things. How does it have a positive impact on you or your daughter or your family or like public perception or anything? It's very stupid. Um, yeah, it is a memoir, so it's nonfiction. Oh no, it's okay, Jay Marie. She's like saying sorry that she's spamming, but Yeah. Yes, Joey Bright's channel, Can I Get a Witness, is very good. Um, I just realized after I started streaming that I am, like, streaming at the same time as she's premiering something, and, like, that's my bad, but, like, this is whatever. Okay. This is, like, the time I have to do it. Hello, Ghost. Anybody else new? Okay. Okay, let's keep reading. Alright. State Security, already eyeing El Puente, which is the newspaper that she runs with all of these, like, queers, okay, had been thrilled to help. They dumped Anna in a mental hospital after what seemed like weeks of getting grilled. When when she told the shrinks she was a political prisoner, they diagnosed her as paranoid and gave her electroshocks until she couldn't shape the letters of her name. By the time they let her out, months later, she decided to flee from her parents' house and sleep with a girl as soon as possible. If she was going to be accused of things, then might as well be true. Um, like it sounds to me like the mother's actions had an impact on her getting arrested, interrogated, and then tortured. Like, if I was a person in this community, even if I thought the daughter was like a slut or something, like whatever it is they're trying to say in the book, I would still be like, "You're a shitty mother that you didn't protect your daughter," you know? Um, yeah. Mhm. Also, I kind of wish they would flush out the lesbian stuff a bit more. I mean, there's still 2 more paragraphs of this section before there's, like, a big gap, but they make it sound like they say she had a boyfriend, Anna, then she was a political prisoner, and she was tortured and whatever. Then suddenly she's like, "As soon as I leave, I need to sleep with a woman." So does that mean the whole time she understood she had an attraction for women but didn't wanna act on it because of, like, conservative reasons or religious reasons or society reasons or whatever? Like, they just say suddenly she decided that. I wish we had more insight into that. Okay. I've thought a lot about this since 9/11 and the war on terror. How we never learn. Homophobes conceive a lesbian activist. A son kills his father at a Theban crossroads. Anna told me because she had to. That was her life, and we were getting serious. She asked me not to spread it around, but even then I was a blabbermouth. I told Amy as soon as I got home. I think I actually made notes too, trying to create some distance, kill it with the filter of history. It was cool and horrible at once, like a train wreck. I was 27, an ignorant American who couldn't have found Cuba on a map. I wished above all else I could have swooped in and saved her, that teenage girl. But all I could do was swipe away a few stray tears. I feel weird spilling it now, but I have to. Because after a while, it took root, the way shared histories do when you live with them long enough. They affect your DNA like radiation. They give birth to you. Okay. Oh, hey Cyber. I kind of want to well, never mind, I guess, but I just wanted to see I assumed Ana Maria Simo. Okay, I found her Wikipedia page. Okay, well, the references to them later on doesn't mention that they're like at least in Wikipedia page. The references to Anna Simo and Kelly Cogswell that I found on the internet doesn't reference them as still being a couple. The book is dedicated to her. Maybe they are a couple and they're just kind of private about it, but I was just wondering if they're still together because she dedicated the book to her. Like that might have just meant she was like a huge influence, but anyway, whatever. Okay, I didn't mean to put you all into suspense. Okay, all right. Okay, this is the next section of the chapter. I don't know how to do this. Like in audiobooks, how do they do this? Because I listen to audiobooks. You see how there's like paragraphs, there's like tiny spaces, and then there's like a paragraph with like a big space. I don't know how you're supposed to like symbolize the big space. Whatever. I met her mother shortly after she told me. Wait, isn't this section of the book called Enemies Within? Maybe Anna is one of her enemies. I mean, I don't think so. It doesn't seem like it, but she's talking a lot about her. Maybe, I mean, who knows? I mean, I'm just like kind of spitballing here. Maybe what's going to happen is like she's establishing that she and Anna, like their relationship and their deep connection to each other. And then maybe it's going to be like them versus like the enemies. I don't know. We'll see. Okay. Maybe it's her mother who's the enemy, right? Okay. I met her mother shortly after she told me. Okay, I also have to say, if her mother's actions somehow resulted in her becoming a political prisoner who was later tortured, I mean, I don't know. I have a complicated relationship with my mother, but I can't really imagine it surviving that. Holy crap. Okay. Anna swung by the Avenue B loft with her and her grandmother in her little red Hyundai. I remember standing there with my shaved head, behind me the shabby building with a mural of palm trees on the front and music blaring from the open door. When she got out of the car and saw me, Faustina's square jaw tightened like a vice. She managed a hello, but boy, how it cost her. Well, yeah, the buzzed head looks super dykey. Like introducing her to your like conservative Catholic mother. um, we drove to Venieros on 11th Street and sat outside where there was room for her grandmother's wheelchair. Ana and Maria Luis, her grandmother, ordered tartufo, that two flavored ball of ice cream. I got a slice of almond cake. Faustina ordered a baba rum. She and I exchanged a few remarks while Anna and her grandmother joked and laughed. Anna squeezed her half to death but didn't touch Faustina, who still seemed frozen at the shame of a dyke daughter. Still enraged that Anna had escaped, but she hadn't. After all those years, she had fought her own husband whenever she wanted to leave the house by herself, when she wanted to work. She only bit her tongue, I figure, because Anna had gotten them out of a hungry Cuba soon after the quote unquote special period. I pretended I didn't know anything, spoke politely in Spanish, made those meaningless sounds that appear to be conversational. I'd had practice after all. That's what families are for. Relatable. How are you guys doing today? Okay. Chapter 11. Now and then, we'd go back to the Catskills, where we'd bake in the sun and read Whitman, or drive to a town 45 minutes away to see a movie, preferably with car chases and exploding things. Anna helped me get my driver's permit, and back in the city, I crashed into a sedan near Canal Street, and an angry Asian guy in a blue suit charged out and screamed for a while, but didn't call the cops or demand insurance. We'd been heading off to the Dyke TV office in Chinatown, where Anna ran the newspaper department and tried to keep the empty takeout cartons from overrunning the desks. She helped start that too, roping in videomaker Mary Patierno and stage director Linda Chapman, so the Avengers wouldn't have to depend on mainstream media. Oh, hey, Aqua. I didn't know there was class today. Okay. I'm actually wondering, since there's no notifications, should I get all your emails and like email everyone whenever I'm about to start a stream or something like that? Like, I figured there's a way I can give you guys notifications. It's not a huge amount of work for me, right? There must be a way to do something like that. I'm not sure how it would work, but all you guys can do is like every single time I schedule a live, go and click set reminder every single time I schedule a live. That I think is the only way you're gonna get notifications. I got my notification, but you were like living your life. Okay. Uh oh, you got a notification. I don't know. People keep telling me they're not getting them, so I don't know what's up. Maybe people have their notifications turned off and they don't know what they're talking about. You all got notifications. Amazing. Okay, well. All right. It had grown into a real weekly show, with art and culture and other segments featuring important Dyke skills like how to change a bicycle tire. Pretty soon, Dyke TV played all over the country on public access stations. I'd leave her at the office and we'd walk past the fruit and vegetable markets. In the evening, the street stank of fish when the ice got dumped in the gutters and the big metal trays were hosed down. Musty, spicy smells came from the open doors of Chinese apothecaries. Trailing after Anna, I was it was inevitable that I'd return to that room upstairs at the center with the folding metal chairs and heat and occasional buzzing fly. I entered tentatively, found a seat off to the side, afraid I'd have to explain where I'd been. Okay, so for those of you who weren't here, I'm going to quickly tell you what's up. So, I think it's been about a year. It's hard to tell with the way the narrative is shared. Um, Ella said she stopped consuming cannabis because it's fucking with her PTSD, but it's difficult to manage her ADHD without it. I totally know what you mean. Like, I'm not high when I do this. I'm not high when I go to work, but like if I have THC in my system like from the night before, like I can tell a difference in my it's like the way I interpret it is that, like my ADHD, like the worst part about it is like zero impulse control, right? Like literally zero impulse control. And I view it as when I have some THC in my system, it gives me like a millisecond more like lag for my impulse. You know what I'm saying? And like I've noticed too when I've gone like months without smoking that it's like the longer you're off it, the more your ADHD kind of like takes over. If that, I don't know. I don't really know exactly what it is I'm saying, but I totally know what you mean with like cannabis and just having some in your body, like affecting your ADHD. It's tough, man. Yeah, I'll let you guys talk about that. Um, yeah, exactly. Ella's like just a little bit more ability to pay attention and get things done without anxiety. Microdosing maybe. Weed makes you nervous and anxious. Okay, 1000% if you don't want to consume cannabis, you definitely should not. However, I will say there's like, like with terpenes and stuff, like different types of cannabis have different types of stuff in them. And I have noticed a big difference. Like there's some weeds that make me like really anxious and paranoid, and then there's other ones that like completely chill me out. So it might just be like the type of weed that you tried or whatever. But this is not me saying you should go out trying all the weeds and find the right one. You do you, man. You don't want to. Rapturous, tell us about so you're saying with ADHD not being on weed has helped you. Can you tell us more about this? I'll be very interested to know. Um, because I've been considering it. I've been thinking about this. Like everything I know about it is kind of anecdotal. She tried microdosing, but I ended yeah. Yeah, I'm the same way. I can't be like I'm like all or nothing. There's no in between. Like same thing with like being a vegetarian or a vegan or whatever. It's like I can't be like a pescatarian. It's like either I eat everything or I am like a vegan. There is no like in between. um yeah, that I hope it's just like a hump you can get past, Ella, that it's just a few days of this really shitty and then it'll feel better. Okay, Raptor says, when you smoke daily for a while, for me, it depressed me and worsened my anxiety. Eventually, I didn't get almost anything done. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to keep reading the book and then I'll check back in with the chat. Okay. All right. Okay, yeah. No, no, no. Okay, I need to ignore the chat. So, she, Anna, Simo, who's a playwright, who is now Kelly Cogswell's girlfriend, apparently, or I mean, she doesn't say girlfriend, but she's like they're intimate and she's met her mom and stuff, so it's her girlfriend. Yeah. Okay. So uh she is like Anna always went to the Lesbian Avenger meeting. So because I was like obsessed with her and following her around, it was inevitable that I would eventually end up at that Lesbian Avenger meeting again. Some of you might be like, this book is about the Lesbian Avengers. Why is it a big deal that she's going back to the Lesbian Avengers? This is what happened. She was like one of the founding members of the Avengers, And uh you know how it is when it comes to like activism. There's like a handful of women who do everything. She ended up becoming one of those women like a year into it or something. And it was like a lot of responsibility and stuff. But she was kind of okay with that because she was like it needs to get done. Then they went to, I think it was Baltimore or something. Like her and the Dykes, they drove from New York to some lesbians who were doing like a commitment ceremony in the 90s. And while they were there, uh there was this one woman that she had some kind of an issue with in the past. What was it? Oh, it was that okay, Kelly Cogswell has some kind of like severe health issues. She doesn't really explain what it is. It's very vague. Like she mentions something, oh, like my guts were not messed up or something. It's very vague. But basically she had like a lot of health issues, and this one woman was like raving at her about alternative medicine and basically telling her that like she needed to like mind over matter about her health issues. And Kelly was not enjoying this, evidently. Anyway, so she kind of avoided this woman. Then they went to this like wedding in Baltimore, or commitment ceremony or whatever in Baltimore. And this same woman was like playing with a tennis ball or something and like throwing it at people. So Kelly took the tennis ball and like put it in her pants because she was like, now she can't have it, right? Then this woman and her friends, other lesbians, like they pushed her to the ground and took her pants off and like were sticking their hands all over the place, like trying to get this ball, but also like just like generally wrestling with her and stuff, like while her pants are off. And none of the women in the room stood up for her. Nobody was like, "Are you okay?" Like literally people like all the women there pretended it didn't happen. So when she drove back to New York, she literally like the next day called the other like co-leader of the Lesbian Avengers and was like, "Yeah, I quit." And they were all like, "Oh, why is this happening?" And she was like, I mean, at least me, I'm like, it should be fucking obvious why this is happening. Um yeah. So after that, she stopped being in the Lesbian Avengers. She says that it's because I know Ella, it's very upsetting. I was like dumbstruck by this because I was like, how is it supposed to be like a place where other women will come to take part in activism when this kind of behavior is normal? Like, I wouldn't feel safe and comfortable in that kind of an environment. Like, I get it that they have like energy and they're angry and they roughhouse and whatever. Like, that's one thing. But like, when it comes to removal of clothes, like, she, in when that happened to her, the way she explains in the book her feelings is she says it was the like because the women who were like doing the commitment ceremony, their family was there as well as like the activist dykes, and she said it was like the old people looking down their noses at her while she was like this was happening to her, like that's what was upsetting to her, and that she was like projecting her issues with her family and her mother into the situation and blah blah blah, that's why she was upset. And I'm like, I mean, obviously probably that's part of it, but I really think that she had like her boundaries violated, you know, and like that's a very decent like understandable reason to be upset. um and it was like a betrayal from like the women who were supposed to be like her sisters, you know. Anyway, that is the last we heard about her interaction with the Lesbian Avengers generally. There's a few individual like Anasimo, like all her friends were Lesbian Avengers, so we keep hearing about them between now and then, but it's not like she's doing actions with Lesbian Avengers. So here we are. We don't know what year it is because she hasn't deigned to tell us that. It's very annoying. I'm going to assume it's around 1995 at this point. Matt Adams said if even one other woman had stood up for her, I feel like it would have really helped. Yes. Yes, I agree. Um, like so the only woman that she's talked about it to Anna Simo. I think that was like before their first kiss or something, like a few months before this point in the book. Well, at least that's my estimation of things. It's very unclear the narrative timeline in this book. And Anna was very upset about it, but like she wasn't there. She didn't like do anything about it. She was just like, you know, like you're my girlfriend, I love you. Like I'm upset this happened to you. Like it didn't have any like far-reaching effects as far as the Lesbian Avengers went. Ella's like how familiar exactly. Okay. I think when I read that, there was someone in the live chat who were like, "Women scare me," and I was like, "Yeah, we." Especially when it's women you trust, they have the ability to hurt you way more deeply than like some random dude does, you know? Because I don't mean in terms of like sexual assault. I just mean like if you trust these women, it's like not only an assault but a betrayal, right? Anyway, hey Dragon. Okay, So, I'm just going to start this paragraph again. Uh, so, trailing after Anna, it was inevitable that I returned to the room upstairs at the center with the folding metal chairs and heat and occasional buzzing fly. I entered tentatively, found a seat off to the side, afraid I'd have to explain where I'd been. But so many people had been on vacation, nobody noticed one more missing dyke. I started around the room and was greeted by smiles, only relaxing when the meeting started, and she wasn't there, the one who yanked down my pants in Baltimore. Quote, the Lesbian Avengers is a direct action group focused on issues vital to lesbian survival and visibility, end quote. It sounded different after a year. Now, and I knew what the words meant. Sorry, now that I knew what the words meant. Okay. This is like a thing they say every time they start one of the Lesbian Avenger meetings. It's they all sit down and they all say this. It's kind of like this is our goal, our values, whatever, and then they start the meeting. Um so she's kind of saying like, it felt different the last time I did it and this time that I did it. Um I guess it wasn't that long though here. Still I find it very annoying. I don't understand the timeline at all. Because she's like women were on vacation, so it wasn't noticeable that I had been missing. Does that mean she stopped attending like in the spring and came back in the fall? So like people who were coming and going from New York City because of because of university schedules that she blended in with them. Is that the timeline? I don't know, but I don't know. Anyway, whatever. Let's move on, I guess. Okay. For several Tuesdays, I didn't do anything but sit in that dusty room and watch. There wasn't much going on. A picnic here, a picket there, against Clinton's idiotic don't ask, don't tell compromise about military queers. Almost every week, new chapters were announced: Atlanta, New Orleans, Minneapolis, San Francisco, and Tampa. Colorado dykes were the first Avengers to be arrested, chained themselves to the fence of the governor's mansion during a protest against anti-gay Amendment 2. They got busted against gay they got busted again, gate crashing a party, a focus on the family, a big backer of the anti gay legislation. We thought it was cool, but there in Colorado, activists were getting slammed. The boycott was working, and the queers losing money were as quick to hate them as straights. Anna threw a party when Sue Friedrich and videomaker Janet Baus had finished editing the Avenger video, Lesbian Avengers Eat Fire 2. She persuaded her mother to make enormous pots of black beans and rice, and everybody brought beer. I didn't eat anything, even though Anna swore the beans were meatless, or almost. Dragon said she likes the color. Thank you. I love like meatless or almost. Does that mean that they cook with like? Aren't there a lot of Latino cultures that cook with like animal fat instead, like lard instead of butter? Okay. Uh, right. Where were we? Okay, or almost. I'd been a vegetarian for almost a decade. Ethical reasons, if you have to know. Screw health. I hung out in the kitchen and bummed cigarettes from the Avengers, blowing smoke up the air shafts and annoying the neighbors. When they turned on the TV and slipped in the fat VHS cassette, I said a goodbye to Anna and went back to Avenue B. I couldn't bear to see my own face on screen, wondering what it would betray as I talked about those 20,000 in front of the White House. Yeah, they had like the Dyke March on DC. Kelly was the organizer of it. That was like the big event that she did, I think, right before, if I'm remembering the timeline correctly, right before um yeah, right before the assault happened and she left. About growing up a dyke in Kentucky. I'd done an interview with Sue and Janet after the DC march. It had been shot there in Anna's front at Anna's, in front of the brick fireplace with a quilt hanging on it. I was still nearly bald from my performance, still so high on whatever we were accomplishing, and feeling whole for the first time ever. So she's like lamenting that after the DC march, she talked a lot about like the euphoria of it, like the hope of it, how they were going to get so much done, like they could do anything together, this kind of thing. And basically, when this assault happened, like this betrayal by one of her sisters, it affected her so deeply that like it completely killed all of that in her. Like she went through a depression. When after that happened, she went through like a legit depression. It was like very sad to read. Okay. One Tuesday in August, Sarah Schulman swung by a meeting. She almost never came anymore, spending a lot of time out of town on book tours where she still pitched the Avengers. She grabbed a spot at the top of the agenda and talked for a few minutes about the communities that were absolutely swamped with anti-gay legislation. Many had no idea how to fight back. She concluded that the Avengers should share skills, offer our organizing services to whoever wanted them, maybe do a kind of freedom ride to call attention to the latest wave of hate coming our way. She left immediately after, and we rolled our eyes a little bit at her abruptness, but decided it was a good idea. The Christians sent forth their minions. Why not us? One of the first requests for help came from Lewiston, Maine, where a local gay rights ordinance was under attack. When the moderator asked for volunteers, two of my fire eating friends, Sarah Pursley and Michelle Kelly, put up their hands along with newbie Chanel Matthews. By September 1st, they were already in Lewiston, ready to work with local queers and Equal Protection Lewiston, the struggling organization that was running the show. The Freedom Ride would end there after a tour through New England, doing actions in cities where where there were Avengers chapters, like Boston and Albany. We started to fax around press releases. We got tons of enthusiastic responses. We also got a letter from an African American lesbian in Albany, practically forbidding us to use the name quote unquote Freedom Ride unless we focused on questions of race. It was more than a letter, it was an injunction, a campaign. The author circulated her demands as widely as possible before we even had a chance to respond. Her heavy handed tactics led most experienced activists to wonder if it was as much about territoriality and homophobia as it was about race. She was a big deal in Albany, famous actually, and we hadn't paid her our respects. But the youngest took it at face value. If she said something was racist, it had to be. It was Barbara Smith, for fuck's sake, the grand dame of black feminism, co founder of Kitchen Table, Women of Color Press, and the Combahee River Collective. She was an icon, almost as much of a saint as Audre Lorde. We wouldn't admit the possibility that a lifetime of fury at racism could possibly miss its target, that we ourselves didn't always aim true. Wait, okay, so the Combahee River Collective, and what was her name? Barbara Smith. Wasn't that Ghost that I need to go through all my old photos? These names sound somewhat familiar. Yeah. Okay. Um, I think that this collective. Remember, I was talking last time about what a collective is. Yes. Okay. This collective was only black women. They were like black women focused, which is obviously super interesting and very cool. Um, there is a book about it. I eventually want to read it, but my reading list is like 1,000 books. So okay, okay. We couldn't admit the possibility that a lifetime of fury at racism could possibly miss its target, that we ourselves didn't always aim true. Yeah, Ghost, if you find cool stuff, post it on Getter or like whatever. Yeah. Okay. Or email it to me or something. Okay. We agreed on changes to the press release, still keeping the name but acknowledging our debt to the earlier Freedom Ride. Younger Avengers organized a teach in. Smith was informed, nevertheless, when she published the article, Blacks and Gays Healing the Great Divide. Smith renewed her attack on the Lesbian Avengers, essentially characterizing us as a white, insensitive, racist group. The proof was that we refused to relinquish the name after a lesbian of color had ordered us to. Like half the group, I was still ready to concede. When bits of the article were read aloud, I'd felt a wave of shame rise up from my knees and go straight to my eyes. I looked around the room and everybody was white, including Marlene and Valerie, Gail, Maura, Andrea, all bleached by contagion. And Anna and Lydia and all the other Latinas also became not just white but Anglo. And Maxime became young and Christian and a black slate. And all the other little quirks of language or age or orientation I had perceived until that moment were erased by the inevitable power of the word white. So, okay, I'm not quite sure. Okay, so I don't know a fuck ton about American history. Obviously, I'm not an American. I mean, I know more than most Canadians probably, but so this freedom ride apparently was a thing for anti-racism, like anti-black racism or whatever. And then the Dykes were like, we're going to do a thing called the Freedom Ride. I don't support this. Um, Not because I don't think the Dykes should have done it, but I think it makes them like not only is it appropriation to take a concept that people of color have used for like specifically racism and to take it and to use it for gay stuff. Like this has been a if you read gay history, this is like an ongoing thing. Like the GLF had the same problem with the Black Panthers. They were like, you're copying our tactics and our movement and like our organized like they're like you're copying us in like every fucking way, but making it about gay stuff. Like can't and my position is basically if you are like a lesbian activist and you have like lesbian shit to do, make up your own crap. That's it. Um okay. So then she talks about how there was Latinas there. Maxine became young and Christian and a blank slate. All the other quirks of the language. Okay. So she's kind of saying like Dragon says many Canadians know more about American history than some Americans. Yeah, it's true. Um then she is like because we were called racists, suddenly all of our differences of like I guess ethnicity and culture were erased into like white. And she is critical of that, I guess. I don't know, it's interesting. Um and the way she characterizes it as like a demand is very interesting. Um, okay, the freedom ride was done by civil rights activists to protest the segregated bus system. That makes sense. I assume it has something to do with segregation. Yeah, but yeah, that's my fucking point. Is like if people know what the freedom ride 1961, if people know what the freedom ride is and they think that, then like it's like stupid to use it for your own thing. Make up your own fucking name. Okay. But then Sarah Schulman and Maxime Wolf said it was a ridiculous idea, thinking anybody could plant a flag in the word freedom. I mean, that's true. It's a pretty big word. Anna, with her accent, agreed. Marlene Colburn, too, shook her head, adjusted the baseball cap over her own black face, and said sadly, "That's Barbara. We'll keep the name." Our elders had spoken, two Jewish dykes and a Latina, and an African American woman who were not ashamed to admire MLK, who admired Gandhi. Some were actually acquainted with Smith, but you could see it on some of the faces, especially us younger ones of all colors, that we in fact accepted the charge the Avengers was a white group and by definition racist. We didn't look at each other the same way after that. It's so strange to me though, cuz like they're saying like we had like Latina women, we had like black women, we had Jewish women, like we had women of different ethnicities and different colors and whatever, okay? But it's like it's just to me it's really strange that like one black feminist or lesbian, I don't think they said she was a lesbian, I don't know, one black woman said this group is racist, and because she said that, all of like the actions and the presence of the black women already or the women of color already in the group was erased. Like to me it's like if you respect black women, then you should respect the fact that they are in the group and they're in positions of leadership and taking action and blah 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 blah. You know what I mean? Um it just seems like a really like this black woman said something is racist, so she gets listened to. These black women who say it's not racist, they don't get like I don't know. It just kind of seems like they only respect the one and not the other. But it's like she said, I guess, that she was like almost at the level of sainthood of Audre Lorde. Like she was very I don't know. I don't know much about this. I'm just kind of trying to play out what is she saying and how does it all work together. Okay. So we didn't look at each other the same after that. So they all accepted that they were racists. Even the ones who were like, we don't like the name. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. All right. In October, the Avengers rented a van or two and draped them with banners calling for lesbian freedom, and a group set out for Boston. It was okay at first. They got lots of friendly honks on the way up, and a warm welcome before they got down to the serious business of eating fire and pamphleteering outside the public library. But when the Avengers arrived at the Boston Outright Conference to screen our video, Lesbian Avengers Eat Fire Too, we found Barbara Smith had set the place ablaze, distributing her damning article to all the professional queers and arbiters of the LGBT community who attacked us under her banner, accused us of quote unquote appropriating the name, of getting black dykes in trouble with their communities, as if quote unquote white dykes were responsible for inspiring black homophobia. When Gail asked for her dark face when Gail asked, with her dark face betraying her Panamanian West Indies roots, "What about me? I'm an Avenger, don't I count?" The answer was pretty much a resounding nope. Afterwards, she who had been so proud to be an Avenger became horribly anguished by having to defend the quote unquote white group she belonged to. At the next meeting, Anna Tedeschi, who was herself a French Haitian American dyke, tried to give it a good spin. Quote, "It's just as well to air things out, confront the divide and conquer techniques of the Christian right," end quote. Except we didn't really confront anything. Not the real problem of racism in the queer community, nor the homophobia and the assumptions dykes would dirty up the name quote unquote freedom ride, nor the hubris of activists, or even how denouncing us as quote unquote right actually erased Avengers of color along with the differences between, for instance, a Catholic Irish immigrant, a Jewish New Yorker, and a white Southern Baptist dyke from Kentucky. Instead, we became terrified accountants, looking only at skin. How many African Americans were there in the room today? How many Asians? That's the thing to me, too, is like, I know race and sexuality are not the same thing, but I have been in that situation where you're in a feminist something and you can tell people are looking around how many lesbians are there. Oh, there's only one lesbian. Oh, there's only two lesbians. And you become the token lesbian in that situation. And that's like actually really like I don't know, anxiety inducing, kind of depressing and disappointing. Like I don't know. I don't like that being in that situation. And I don't know. So if you look at it from a certain way, what Barbara Smith did like made the lesbian Avengers more hostile probably to the women of color who were already in it. I mean, this is what she's fucking saying, isn't it? And will obviously prevent more women of color from joining it or taking positions of leadership within it. Um, I don't know. I'm trying not to like go too far outside the scope of the book because I feel like I don't know enough about this issue. Like it's very superficial. Like the coverage is just kind of saying, she had this letter. She went to the event to hand out this letter. We went there. Afterwards, this is what happened. But like maybe I should read the letter, for example. We'll see. Okay. Okay. Well, not maybe. Probably eventually for sure. Like, um, no, I agree. I agree that the choosing of the name was stupid. I agree that. Like if I was in a group who was gonna do like that kind of thing, where you literally take a thing that black activists have done and then you just like throw some rainbows on it and you're like, look, it's ours. That's very I don't agree with that. Yeah. So Rapture says it sounds insensitive for a white majority group to choose that name because freedom fighters were all about black rights and there was a lot of tragedy involved. Yeah. And that's like, I don't she didn't again, she did it's kind of superficial. She didn't explain how they arrived at that name, what the discussion was about potentially changing the name. Um Matt Adams says, "I forget. Did they choose it knowing the history behind it?" I kind of feel like how could you not know the history behind it if it's like the 90s? It's only 30 years after that. I don't know. Um, yeah, I agree they shouldn't have chosen that name. But I'm not sure. Maybe she's not going into too much detail because she doesn't want it to land on any one woman's shoulder that like she was the racist. But she literally says like about half of us wanted to change the name, but she doesn't go into any detail about why didn't they change the name? Did they have a discussion about it? Like she didn't go into that, so I don't know. Anyway, all right. Let's keep moving, yeah? Yeah, that's true. Matt Adams says I would hope so, but history isn't a lot of people's strong suits. I just feel like that's so like within the public conscious like what happened 30 years ago? Like well, I guess 9/11 is like a good comparison. But like I don't know. I feel like these kind of huge society shifting things are like usually pretty fucking memorable. Okay. All right. Oh yeah. So she was like we all became accountants counting how many women of color were in the room at all times. Which was too bad because we could have used a real discussion about race and power, but also class and education. Sure, Sarah Schulman could breeze in and get a group to do anything, but there were also certain African American and Latino and Asian voices that had authority too. But when the merely beige Anna started to speak in her marked Cuban accent, the eyes of newer Avengers seemed to glaze over almost immediately. Nobody listened either to this glowingly white Russian girl who was still struggling in English, or even noticed that Denise, a young black dyke, rarely opened her mouth. Maybe because she didn't seem to have a degree from which one of the seven sisters, or was kind of fat. I wonder how that would have happened if we had responded differently. Allowed Smith to assume the Freedom Ride was hers. That the Avengers were all white and had never mourned Hattie Mae Cohen's or acted on behalf of the Rainbow Curriculum. What would have happened if instead we had asked if African Americans were much wiser, freedom in such scarce supply, that they couldn't spare a little for us too? In those divide or conquer days, would she have responded to a plea for generosity? Or was it inevitable to wait 20 years for an African American president to see Seneca Falls, Selma, and Stonewall as three faces of one struggle for freedom and human rights? Okay, so she is literally grouping in like the anti racist actions as if it's the same shit as anti homophobia, and like it's not the same shit. That's how you got in this problem, lady. By thinking it's all the same thing. It's literally not the same thing. That's why you guys think it's like it's so very stupid. Okay. Like, okay, like if you're just discussing language, obviously the word freedom is like, you know, hard to pin down. You can't say you own it. But freedom, what was it? Freedom ride, right? That's specific, right? I don't know. The whole thing is very stupid to me. They should have just fucking like I don't know. When I do with my activism, isn't Stonewall homophobic? No, no, no. This is not about Stonewall the organization. This is about Stonewall 1969. Like the events. Like she named Selma, Stonewall, and Seneca Falls, right? So she named specific events and she is like, look, it's all the same thing. Selma and Stonewall were about, sorry, Seneca Falls and Selma were about race and segregation. Stonewall was about gay people getting arrested by the cops for like wearing the wrong gender's clothes and whatever. Like it wasn't about racial segregation. I don't know why she lumps them together. I don't like that. Exactly, Matt Adam. It is definitely different to see similarities in struggles instead of seeing them as absolutely equivalent. Yes. Like see how you're like that's the thing too is like when GLF was like getting in trouble from the Black Panthers, I was like why can't you just like see what they're doing and pick out like the really effective stuff or like how did that tactic go down and like make it your own. You know what I mean? Like see what's the same, pick out that stuff and then make it your own. You don't need to like actually copy it. It's very weird to me. Okay. Phil Mitchell. How could I have known you're from the UK with a name like that? Do you like Phil Mitchell a lot or you hate him? Like, what is the. Oh, wait, I'm thinking of. What even is his name? Maybe I'm thinking of a different guy. Okay. Chapter 12. I wonder how many people have declared this book to be racist. Probably a lot. Like, so far in this book, I could definitely see people declaring the book racist. I missed Sarah and Michelle, two of my fire eating friends, and took the Greyhound up to Maine, meaning to help out a couple of weeks. But I arrived with a scratchy float and bleh, sorry. Phil is a tosser and EastEnders is shite. Yeah, hard to disagree with you, bro. Okay. But I arrived with a scratchy throat and bloody underwear because I always got my period when I climbed onto a plane or a bus. I only lasted long enough to draft a flyer or proofread something before they sent me home, pale and feverish. Still, I got a good look at the place, and Lewiston was nothing to shout about. Decrepit, urban, grey, a rotting town abandoned by the textile industry, and the bluebird of hope. The apartment wasn't much better, damp and filled with bits of notebooks, empty pizza boxes, neon green buttons, and a handful of depressed dykes who wanted to change the world and ended up stuffing envelopes full of crap they didn't even get to put on some asshole's doorstep and set on fire. Okay, so um for those of you who weren't here, oh hello Aisha. For those of you who weren't here, one of the kind of affluent Avengers who was barely around showed up and was like, there's like a lot of anti-gay legislation in small towns. We should do something about it. And then she left, and she was kind of like, "You do you, you know." Um, um, and so they were like, "Okay, what should we do?" And some of them were like, "Lewiston, Maine. It's really serious over there." So they sent three dykes, Sarah, Michelle, and someone else whose name I can't remember. That she's again like I think the way the book is written is very confusing because she's just like, "I missed Sarah and Michelle, two of my fire-eating friends." This I don't know really. I'm pretty sure that they're because she's mentioning Lewiston that that's where they are. That those are the dykes who were sent there. But basically, they like moved there to do activism, to fight against this legislation. So that's what she's talking about here. Okay, I think that Sarah and Michelle might be the two dykes that she became BFFs with when she first got to. Um, were they named that? There was two lesbians she became like very close friends with when she first moved to New York, and she followed them around everywhere. And oh no, because she slept with one of them, so I think they stopped being friends. Whatever. Okay, whatever. It's hard to keep track. All right. The newbie was Chanel Matthews, a young black woman who was the epitome of elegant urban cool. She came to the Avengers fresh out of the army, and at her first meeting when we were calling for Lewiston volunteers, she stuck up her hand and was on her way. Why the hell not? The smiling Mary Lou came from Austin. I think Sarah and Michelle had been part of the New York Avengers from the beginning, fire eaters like me, and roommates at the loft on Avenue D, where we held our legendary fundraising parties. Why did she? Oh, Mary Lou was from Austin, I think. Okay, okay. Yeah. So didn't she used to? If the roommates of Loft and Avenue D, yeah, she used to live with Sarah and Michelle. Okay, it's not very clear. I don't know why she writes like this. It's a little bit confusing. I don't like it. Okay. Um. All right. Michelle was a pastry chef, trained up in Paris. She had glasses and thick curly black hair, and horse sense galore. Sarah taught English at a second school as a second language and barely made enough to pay the rent and keep herself in smokes. She was a ringer for the young Leonardo DiCaprio, though far too laconic to climb on the prow of anything and shout. Sarah and I kept company for a while after my thing with Jennifer. Okay, so this is the same Sarah, but this is a different. She's now dating a different woman. Sarah was dating Jennifer. Kelly slept with Jennifer. That ended their friendship. Now Sarah is dating Michelle. It's a different situation now. Okay. Sarah and I kept company for a while after my thing with Jennifer. We didn't do much, hung out, messed around. Once, after a hurricane passed over the city, we struggled along the East River Promenade in a gusting wind. Waves jumped over the rusting, crumbling handrails and in some places claimed the highway. Dragon says need a diagram. Exactly. Um, yeah. And when did she tell us about that? It was like chapter 2 that she was like, yep, typical dyke drama. Women cheating on each other, having exes they can't be friends with. Okay. Anyway. Um, we leaned into each other as ballast, kissed each other's salty lips. Another time we dressed up for a party, her in a blue wig, me in a blonde one, and a gold sequin dress that sweet Allison lent me, which I balanced out with a pair of big Doc Martens. I should have played it cool and sophisticated, but instead went around like a 3-year-old demanding, "Guess who I am? Do you know who I am?" Nobody really knows with dykes, especially ones like Sarah, who masked herself in an army jacket and blue jeans and a wrath of cigarette smoke. But then you'd find out she went to Dartmouth and had done stuff in Africa that she'd tell you about like it was nothing. If you didn't know better, you'd dismiss her, dismiss us all, because we preferred shabby to chic and often camouflaged ourselves as butch in the street. Equal protection Lewistons, straight consultants, couldn't see her at all, even if they were heading up to the front to the fight to preserve the town's pro-gay statute. They had actually thrown a fit when Britain's BBC News wanted to interview the lesbian Avengers Freedom Riders as part of their coverage. When the Freedom Riders got to Lewiston, Equal Protection Lewiston shoved them into a room with the windows papered over so they weren't visible from the street. And when the Avengers got sick of stuffing envelopes full of ugly promises that we queers couldn't try to adopt kids, EPL said that we queers wouldn't try to adopt. Oh, so they're saying, like, give us equal protections. Don't worry, we're not coming after your kids. Okay. Um, EPL said they could go hand out pamphlets as long as they didn't look too dykey. After all, everybody hates queers, especially the poor, which Lewiston was full of. The best way to win civil rights was to hide just who was going to get them. Yes. This is a very normal thing in the gay rights history. You know, you need the good faces to be the face of things. You don't want to be associated with any, like, you need feminine lesbians and masculine gay men to be PR. That's it. End of story. Anybody else looks bad. That's like the entire perspective. But like this is like the mid 90s now. I mean, homophobia is still a thing, so I don't know why I would expect much more from mid 90s. Um, Matt Adams says I'm still friends with some of my exes. Some stereotypes have some truth to them. Oh no, I know. I'm aware. Yes, I know all the dyke drama stereotypes are true. Okay. Um, like even I only have one ex, but I'm pretty sure like Dragon is a great example. Dragon just happens to be from the same city as me and has mentioned casually that she knows like the wife of this person or knows the owner of this or that. And I'm like, I know like dykes who know that. And I'm just like, if I eventually date again, like there is like, what are the chances that my ex has some kind of like second or third degree connection to whoever I date next? You know what I'm saying? It's like unavoidable. Like shit. Okay. Um, all right. Okay. When I was there, Sarah introduced me to one of the EPL's consultants. That's EPL's Equal Protection Lewiston. Um, Phil Mitchell says lesbians have a tangled web. Yes, like that's probably one of the best episodes. Dragon says 6 degrees of dykedom. Exactly. That's probably one of the best episodes of the L Word. There's an episode of the L Word where what's her name? The journalist one does like a web of like the dykes in LA and all of the women they've slept with or dated. And she was like, we've all slept with the same woman by like 1 degree of separation because like, and it was just Alice, yes. But anyway, that was like a great episode because it's like actually literally accurate for like everywhere. Yeah, okay. Okay. She was about what you'd expect, appropriately coiffed and made up and perfumed. She smiled even more than I did and said how happy she was to have the Avengers on board. Then she told the story about how Sarah had raised all the money for them, leaving out the part that EPL had seen the gay community as such a drain on the campaign that they hadn't even recognized them as potential donors until Sarah came along and started calling them. Such good work, she reiterated. Lewiston needs its own Avengers chapter. Beware of what you wish for. All beds lead to Shay. You mean Shane from the L word. Lip service in the UK is the UK L word. Yes, I'm aware. Shane was the hub. Yes. Yeah, it's definitely a numbers thing. It's more than one episode. It's a thing in a lot of episodes. Oh, well, Commutaccio, to be honest with you, I only watched the L word like I tried to watch it twice. The first time I think I got to the Shane's non-wedding, and then I think I started it again. I didn't even get that far. I've tried. I can't really get into that show, unfortunately. Okay. So she is like, Sarah, this lesbian, who I think is the pastry chef one. Yeah, whatever. Um, oh no, Sarah's the English as a second language one who you wouldn't know it, but she went to Dartmouth and is very smart, but she dresses like, lesbian, so people like overlook her. She is the one who raised all this money. She is the one who this woman from the Equal Protections, Lewiston, is like, wow, she's so amazing. And she was like, yeah, we should have a lesbian Avengers in Lewiston. Okay. A couple of weeks before the election, Sarah and the others sent the New York meeting a copy of a letter they'd finally given to the EPL, very politely notifying them that while the Avengers continued to share their goals, their skills could only be used to their full advantage working independently. And frankly, Lewiston queers deserved action from people who weren't ashamed to be lesbian or gay. Their guts told them that a closet, a closeted, fearful campaign did more harm than good, and it was time to put it to the test. I should have been glad, but I only felt anxious. Like we were going to get hauled off to the principal's office. I'd temporarily run out of nerve. It was partly the thrashing we got at the hands of Barbara Smith, partly the snotty reminders from the EPL that the Avengers had to do what the locals wanted. My god, we were outsiders. There were questions of class to consider, over entitlement. We couldn't deny how many Ivy Leaguers were in the room, how much accomplishment, even if it wasn't mine. I didn't want to be cut off from the community that we were supposed to be working for. I forgot for a minute that EPL didn't represent all of gay Lewiston, or even most of them, just the ones who had money and the press lists. In reality, the Avengers entered more deeply into the city, advised by local students, members of ACT UP Portland, and LGBT people too poor or queer to be poster children for the EPL because they like to hang out in bars, or members of the Franco American minority that maybe still had a French accent or didn't look freshly scrubbed. Many were pissed that the poor neighborhoods they dared to live in had been totally ignored by the EPL. Yeah, this is a thing. Like I was saying in the whole gay movement that like so not only was it that they wanted to have like the gays who would be like good visible representation who didn't look too like faggy or too dykey. Not only was it that, but also it was often a class thing, like and a race thing. Um and so that's how you would have like I'm trying to think of the names of stuff. But like Gay Liberation Front and like Gay Activist Alliance, they were very like queer in your face. Like you can look as dykey as you want, you can look as faggy as you want, like right? And then there was the more like proper ones who were like, we want to have like, professional looking businessmen and businesswomen speaking to the cameras. They like separated them, right? So basically, what she's saying is that the EPL was the kind of elitist one. And because of that, they had actually disenfranchised a lot of the queer people in the area. Okay. Um, Yogi, what cult did they join? Yogi says I used to have a lot of hot lesbian friends, but all of them joined a cult except one. Why? Dragon was a Leatherman on Hedwig and the Angry Inch. Yes, I knew this. Um, Dragon was also a Leatherman on Queer as Folk. I mean, the L word. Here's a yeah. I'm pretty sure this is Portland, Maine, because they're talking about Maine. Oh, Ghost is asking about Amy Dias. She didn't get mad at. Okay, I will give you like a very brief synopsis of the Amy Dias situation. I was like quite involved and know a lot of the details, and it's a lot of drama and bullshit. Queer as Folk was shot in Toronto. There, the gay bar that it was shot in is called Woody's. It's on Wood Street. So, um, and where's the Liberty Diner? Isn't that another diner on Parliament? Like they're both on Parliament in the Village, or no? Yeah, right? I don't know. Okay. Oh, you want to know if she's okay? Honestly, I don't know. Um, her situation was very messed up. Um, I think basically she is very mentally unstable. Ooh, Sarah Schulman lived in Toronto in the late 90s and early 2000s. Very interesting. A lot of it was shot on location across the Loblaws and Lower Jarvis and Lakeshore. Oh, interesting. Um, um, okay, but I'll like quickly give a synopsis of the Amy Diaz situation. So she came on the scene, I don't know, a couple years ago. She hasn't been around forever. She was only a GC for maybe like 2 or 3 years or something. Um, and she was like, her behavior is very comparable to Curtis Tripp's behavior, in my opinion. Like, she declared herself like a representative of lesbians and butches. So she would like if she was like in a Twitter conversation with a lesbian who wasn't butch, she would suddenly be like, "This is my opinion, like as a butch, and if you don't respect me, you're like homophobic towards butches," or like she would like state something, and then if lesbians like even I did this a couple times, I would gently be like, "Oh yeah, like I agree with this, this, and this, but I would see this in a different way," and she'd be like, "You're homophobic." Like, it was really nuts. She she declared herself, like, a representative of, like, everyone. It was really bizarre. And, like, a lot of lesbians would be like, "You don't speak for me. Like, why are you saying that?" Um, and then, yeah, like, she's very mentally unstable. Why? Yes, because she's very mentally unstable, VF. Okay. Um, right. So then she started doing a lot of weird things. She would The one I can tell you about is when she got into, like, an interaction with me, and then I can just tell you that this happened basically the same concept with many different people. So, one day, she made this big thread about how, you know, only weak lesbians transition, and, like, detransitioners are traitors to trans people, and, like, if you can't even pick a side, like, what are you? Like, have some loyalty to trans people, and, like, all of this ridiculous crap, okay? Like, really, really over the top. Like, um any lesbian who transitions is, like, fucking over everyone else and deserves, like, horrible and I was just like, I understand, like, you know, obviously, like, I've talked about this. Like, when a lesbian transitions, it sends a signal to other lesbians, right? When you're in a lesbian space and there's a lesbian who has transitioned, it has a big effect, right? I'm not saying that's not a thing, but she was like, "They're horrible people, like, fuck them." Like, it was, like, really, really over the top. And so and this whole thing about how like like if you detransition you're a traitor to trans people. So I literally like I retweeted each of her things in the thread and I was like there's only a few I can remember. So the one that I was like only because she said only weak lesbians transition. Guess what Amy Diaz is right now? Right now Amy Diaz is a trans man, okay? Um and I retweeted each of them. The only one I can really remember was the one where she was talking about right, that you're a traitor if you detransition. I was like, so your position is that if transition is worsening your mental health or your health or whatever, you shouldn't stop because of loyalty. Like you should do what's against your best interest because of loyalty. I was like, how does this make any sense? And that's the only one I can remember. I quote tweeted the entire thread, each of them being like, I don't get it. Like, what are you trying to say? Because even the thread within itself was not consistent. Within the thread, she was like, detransitioners should shut up, but also if you are transitioning your like it was just like really inconsistent and I was just like what does it mean? Anyway, she like so I retweeted dragon exactly. I retweeted each of them just kind of being like what does this mean? Like I don't really get it. Like where are you going with this kind of thing? Um Detrans is accepting yourself exactly VF because exactly that's what I mean. Like it wasn't internally consistent in her thread anyway, and also just like a bunch of random like misogynistic bullshit in my opinion. Anyway, when this happened, she lost like 300 followers in one day because of that thread, and then she like messaged me. This is before I was banned from Twitter, obviously. So this was I guess 3 years ago almost. Um, She messaged me and she was like, "You have no integrity and like you're full of lies and like how can you treat me this?" I don't even remember what it was, but it was like really dramatic and over the top. And I was like, "I have no integrity because you said this thing and I took it to like the logical endpoint and asked you, is that really what you're trying to say? So I have no integrity." I was like, "If you had integrity, you would back up your own fucking position on things, wouldn't you? That's what integrity anyway, whatever." Okay. Exactly, VF. It makes no fucking sense. So this happened. She was like, "You're evil and lesbophobic and blah blah blah, whatever. I'm all the bad things, and I block you." Okay, fine. Um, but basically, what she did with me, she lost like I think like 300 followers that day. She did this over and over again with like different demographics or like different groups. Like she would subtweet some really big rad fems or some really big GCs, and then she would like do like this like a thread like shit talking like this thread basically she was shit talking detransitioned lesbians, right? So then all the people who care and follow the detransitioned lesbians unfollowed her. Another time she shit talked women who like different groups, and so she kept doing this and she lost like a fuck ton. She lost like thousands of followers in like a few weeks. um and basically Exactly, VF. I wouldn't want a woman stuck in a woman hating cult. Yeah, exactly. That's why I said like her position was essentially misogynistic. Um, so she did this with multiple different women, with pissing off a lot of different people, blocking everyone, saying everyone is a lesbophobe, blah blah blah. Um, and so at the end of the day, she had pissed off so many people. Like she also called herself a journalist, even though she only wrote opinion pieces. Like whatever. But like the places that were formerly publishing her, like I can't even remember. There was some kind of drama that she was like freaking out at one of the women on one of the sites she wrote for, that that woman is lesbophobic even though she was a lesbian, like all kinds of bullshit. She basically burned so many bridges and pissed off so many women that like nobody would talk to her anymore and nobody would retweet her anymore or anything like that. um no, I'm not saying nobody's a lesbophobe, but I'm just saying like literally lesbians who were in her corner, like I'm like I, she also like she was like she was like, "Oh, I'm gonna run for like I'm gonna start like a lesbian party of the United States and like run for president, like as lesbian representation." Aisha said she's mentally ill. Yeah, exactly. Um, or like she wanted to start like a Dyke TV thing. I thought that was really cool. She asked me to do like coverage, like the Canadian correspondent, and I was like, "Okay, cool. Like, tell me what to do." Um, or like I don't know. She had like a lot of different like initiatives. She wanted to start like some like lesbian web series and stuff like this, but she always had like tons of things that she was like, "Oh, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this," and like get women involved. And then like a lot of those women were the ones that she like publicly got into fights with. Like I was one of those women. Like the whole thing was ridiculous. But basically, she pissed off so much of the GC community and so many rad femmes. Nobody would platform her. Oh, that was the other thing. Like a lot of the time that I knew her, she was a barista and she said she was living in her car. Um, and that she needed money. So she was like constantly talking to like big name, or at least not even big name, Twitter accounts of women who had money. There's like a couple of like there's a fair amount of lesbians on Twitter who are like, retired or like had a like a life as an electrician or something, so they have money. You know what I mean? And she would always be like, "Oh, I'm gonna borrow like can I borrow like $600 from you?" Like, "Oh, I'll pay you back like next week or something." And she did this with like many women, never paid anyone back. Um So, like, I don't know, she just burned her bridges in so many ways with so many women that, like, nobody would platform her, nobody would give her positive attention, nobody was giving her money anymore, and I think she literally flipped because she needed attention and affirmation and she wasn't getting it. Like, I think her number 1 principles, her guiding principles are, like, narcissism. Everything else is secondary to that. So when she stopped getting positive attention and affirmation, um, she had to, like, switch sides to get attention, but it actually worked out so bad for her because what happened was, um, within GC, if she wanted to interact with women, she was constantly apologizing because it would be like, "Oh, I wanna write for your outlet, but I've lambasted all of your writers. Oh, I'm sorry that I said all those mean things about your writers, but can you please, like, platform me," right? And then exactly, VF says you lost whatever cred you got, exactly. So, like, um but then she switched, so First of all, she was in, like, one Twitter group chat with some, like, Turvan, like, UK TERFs, and she was like, "I have, like, 16,000 screen caps that I gave to, like, Pink News, and they're gonna write, like, exposés about, like, the mean lesbian TERFs." Anyway, they wrote, like, one article, and then, like, in the article okay, this is, like, the reality of the situation for those of you who don't know. I didn't really need to get into all this, but whatever. The middle of a random stream is the perfect time to do this. Um, VF says, "At least I stand with my unpopular views." Exactly. It's like have principles. Like, it's really strange to me. Anyway. Um, oh, Ghost, you sent her money. Fuck, Ghost, do I know you on Twitter? With one of my songs. Ghost, what's your Twitter? Okay. Um, what was I about to say? Oh, then there was the thing with like Seattle. Like, she flipped so hard, so much. Oh yeah, Pink News. So she was like, "I'm giving these screen caps to Pink News," and like, even though she fancied herself a journalist, I'm pretty sure Pink News, I have no idea who this lady they're talking about is, but they are very passionate about it. She was like this lesbian who positioned herself as like an activist who like flipped to being a TRA in a very, very public way. Like, so she was in this like random Twitter group chat. I'm in a lot of Twitter group chats. You don't use social medias. How did she find you to get money out of you? Um, yeah. So she like took screen caps and she was like, "Ooh, I'm gonna write." Anyway, the expose was like super, super weak sauce. And in the expose, she was like, "Oh yeah, Julie Bindel said, yeah." So she flipped completely because she was now like siding with the TRAs. She was like, "Julie Bindel, was gonna find me a wife to like get me a green card." And then like, literally what happened was that Julie Bindel like, every single time I ever talked to Amy Dias, every single time, like, middle of the night on Facebook messages, Twitter DMs during the day, doesn't matter what the context is, every single time, "I'm lonely, I don't have a girlfriend, I'm horny, I don't have a girlfriend, I haven't had sex in forever, I need a girlfriend." Every single time you talk to her, this is what comes up, every single fucking time. So, shockingly enough, she was always planning to move to the UK, always talking she wants to move to the UK. So these UK dykes were like, when you move here, we'll introduce you to the dykes, like we'll help you find a place to live, like, just like friendly shit. Like if you're gonna move to another country, they were like, yeah, we'll help you, right? Um, and I think it must have been Julie Bindel, although who the fuck knows because Amy Dias is a liar. But somebody was basically like, if I introduce you to like my lesbian friend circle, that'll be a dating pool. Maybe you can find someone to date. And then in the Pink News article, she spinned it as if this is like sex trafficking or some insane off the like insane bullshit, okay? Um and Julie Bindel sued Pink News about it, and Pink News had to like legally was forced by a judge to like publish like an apology or a correction or something. Um anyway, Uh, yeah, so then she was published by Pink News, and it was like a really big flop. All these TRAs were like frothing at the bit, being like, "We're gonna find all of this like really like seedy insider information." She was like, "It's an expose of the turfs, right?" And everything was like really boring. It was like there was nothing. Um, oh hey gay, there was nothing in the Pink News articles about any of the turfs that was like insider information. Like it was all really boring shit. And so now she is in a situation where she has flipped sides. So she was already persona non grata to the GCs and the Radfems. Now she is like persona non grata on steroids to the GCs and the Radfems. And even she is also persona non grata to the TRAs because she's a turf. There's no way to redeem yourself once you've been a turf, really. So she is constantly gay knows the whole thing. I know Aisha. Gay knows more than me about it, actually. Or probably similar amounts of stuff. But like, um, so what does she have to do every time every fucking day? You should have seen her Twitter after Gay says Amy Dias memorialized me in Kiwi Farms as a founding member of the International Network of Powerful Lesbians. Yeah, she's the originator of that. That she was in like one fucking Twitter group chat and was like, "There is an international network of powerful lesbians, like, like killing trans people or whatever the fuck she said." Okay, um, but yeah, so she's now persona non grata to the Radfems and the TRAs because they were like, the only reason you had value was to give us all the inside information. You didn't really give us any inside information, and you used to be a turf. So every fucking day after this, if you looked on her Twitter, every day it's tons and tons of TRAs, um, who who would show up and be like, "Oh, like this is interesting. Like I'm glad you've come to your senses and you're not a turf anymore." And they're like, "But don't you like consider all the suicides you're responsible for? Don't you don't like think of all like the transphobic like panic attacks that you inspired while you were being like all of this shit, right?" And every single day, all she's doing is apologizing, 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 apologizing until guess what? You'll never guess what happened next. Guess what? She was like, "I'm exploring my identity." So now her name is like Bo Dias or some shit. um, and she believes in transphobia. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, exactly. This is what I was saying before. Gay says Amy Dias also wrote a couple of articles for After Ellen before MJ and I became owners. Yeah, but she got into so much beef with every single website she wrote for. Nobody would platform her anymore. Like that's part of the reason I think she flipped was she pissed off. She burned all of her bridges. There was no one left like on her side and anything. Um, yeah. So then she was like apologizing every fucking day, all the time to the TRAs because now they're like her people, right? Um, but that wasn't enough. So, what do you do when you're a woman who has been accused of like thought crime by the queer community? You claim a gender identity, right? Does it like absolve you? No, but it makes it more slightly more manageable, okay? So she was like I'm exploring my identity and then people were like what does that even mean? Like the TRAs were like what does that even mean? um and eventually she's like I'm a trans man whatever, okay. Um I don't know what she's doing now. If you look at her Twitter, it's like she's just talking about baseball and stuff. Like there's not really and there's like no interaction on her Twitter, like zero. I mean, I haven't checked in months. Probably I checked like 6 months ago or something. But I did look at her Twitter a while ago and there was like no interaction on it. So like whatever she's doing um I mean, she's obviously like a very traumatized lesbian. She needs fucking help. And like all of these women, like at the end when things are going really bad, there was a couple of women who reached out to her and were like, "Look, we know you're like struggling with your mental health and whatever and we want to help you, like tell us how we can help you." And she was just like no, fuck all you guys, like. And at the end there was a lot of women on Twitter who were kind of saying like um kind of being like screw her or whatever, right? And then a bunch of other women were like but look, she's clearly really mentally unwell. So like everybody was trying to like have compassion for her, but she like was such an asshole that it was impossible. um Yeah, gay, I said that right before you got here. She wrote that Julie Bindel promised her a wife. That's where that joke came from. Yeah. Um, and then oh, the last thing. So she had like blocked me on everything except Facebook. I don't know why. I think she must have forgotten. But she went to remember when Megan Murphy did that thing in Seattle? I think it was in 2019 or 2020. Because this is pre-COVID, right? This must have been 2019. When Megan Murphy did that thing in Seattle and the Antifa showed up and like had that huge protest, right? Amy went to that and she was there with trans activists. This was right after I had talked to a teenager, a lesbian teenager who had just turned 18 and was telling me her experience with the gay community center in Seattle, and with the typical bullshit about these Tims raping lesbians, right? And I don't know. Amy posted all these photos of being at the protest, and I commented. I didn't even comment actually. There was a woman who was saying like basically, I support you, like, having your opinions and your freedom and whatever, but she's like, "Don't you realize that you're a lesbian who's marching next to men who think lesbians don't exist?" Something along these lines. Very diplomatic, very nuanced, right? But as we know with Amy, that doesn't really matter. I liked that comment immediately in my DMs. You're a fucking transphobe. You're horrible. How dare you even comment on my, like, being on my page, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, I have literally spoken days ago to a lesbian from Seattle who talked about being, knowing other lesbians who've been raped by Tims. I'm like, you're standing shoulder to shoulder with these fucking rapists. I mean, I don't know what you think. Maybe you think I'm like, that's wow, Benji, that's really like crazy. That's a but like no, literally. Like, you are standing shoulder to shoulder. Antifa, I've known women who used to be in Antifa, right? Like, who were queerios and whatever. And they were like, the men in Antifa get away with tons of sexual violence. Like, it's normalized there. Anyway, so I just told her, I was like, you're standing shoulder to shoulder with men who correctively rape lesbians, and I'm the bad guy. And she was like, how dare you say that? You don't know what you're talking about, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, anyway, she blocked me on Facebook. That was the end of it. But like, you just, from my interaction with her, if she treated everybody that way, obviously she wasn't going to have many friends for very long. Um, anyway, that's the Amy Dias situation. Okay. I didn't mean to go off on like a fucking 30-minute tangent about it, but that was a wild ride. Yeah. Um so I don't know. If you look her up, she has an IMDb page because she is like the second cousin of fuck, I don't know who that guy who was in Dallas Buyers Club, the really creepy one. I don't know what his name is. Her Medium is still up. What's her most recent piece? I just want to see if she's active. July 26, 2021. I should do. You know what? I think I might. I've been thinking I want to start. Jared Leto. Yes, thank you, Cave Monster. I've been thinking I want to start doing the Benji's Matchbox, where I just like find one article, one Twitter thread or whatever, and like rant about it. I think I'm gonna wrap, and I've been trying to like figure out how to conceptualize of it that it's very different than the Benji soapbox. Um, I'm going to wrap up this chapter, and then I'm going to start a new live stream. And I'm going to read her most recent article on Medium and rant about it. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Okay, so we left off. I'm gonna reread the last. We were reading a book. Yeah, I know, Matt Adam. Okay, I'm going to read the last paragraph before we started, where I started rambling about shit. In reality, the Avengers entered more deeply into the city, advised more local students, members of ACT UP Portland, Maine, and LGBT people, too poor or queer, to be poster children for the EPL because they like to hang out in bars, or were members of the Franco American minority that maybe still had a French accent or didn't look freshly scrubbed. Many were pissed that their poor neighborhoods they dared to live in had been totally ignored by the EPL. You can't tell me what to do, VF. If I want to start a new stream, I'm going to start a new stream. You're not my mom. Okay. Looking now at the reports in the archive, I can't believe how much the Avengers in Lewiston got done in the few weeks before the election. They helped churn out English French literature, went door to door handing out pamphlets, and registering voters, all out as queer. They hit income, high crime areas that EPL had dismissed, and even their advisors warned against. Shivered in front of literature tables, and found that people who stopped to talk were surprisingly welcoming. Or maybe just surprised. Nobody ever went to their decaying neighborhoods, not liberals, not conservatives, or fascists or commies. The Avengers were the first in decades to turn up and look them in the eyes. More important, they paid attention to local queers, taking voter registration forms to bars, persuading people to hold house parties where they showed the Avengers movie and talked about how Lewiston was part of something bigger, a national attack on LGBT people. They struck a chord, got kudos for standing up to the EPL, which was widely resented, as one dyke told them, quote, "You might be an outsider to Lewiston, but we're all from queer," end quote. End quote. People from the community started getting involved, suggesting their own events, getting so excited they came out in front of TV cameras, even when they hadn't meant to. Okay, I just want to briefly comment. Um, uh, like LGBT. Like, okay, clearly the lesbian adventures were not very lesbian focused. I mean, so far in this book, they seem to be very like about gay men and lesbians. Okay, that's one thing. Now it's been in the last chapter that she says LGBT instead of gay and lesbian. Like in the next section of the book, is it going to be LGBTQ and then LGBTQIA plus? Like, what is this? Is it going to keep getting more? Okay. It would be cool to have a little Benji child, but I'm sure you're not one of my egg children. Yeah, no, I was like very ADHD as a child. I'm very tame now compared to my child. Okay. Um, Though strictly speaking, queers were defeated at the polls, the Avengers' strategy worked. The Lewiston Sun Journal reported that wherever the Avengers and out queers had hit the streets, the gap narrowed substantially. We almost won. On the other hand, the areas that EPL thought they had in the bag, based on their quote unquote professional polling data, actually did the worst. Equal Protection Lewiston was furious, spreading it around that the loss was the Avengers' fault, these New York dykes parachuting in and demanding to do things the way they did them in the big city. Know it alls, outsiders, egomaniacs, irresponsible, insensitive to local issues. Which locals? Which issues? Who gets to decide? Um, ah, you guys are so nice. Okay. The Avengers went back to a hero's welcome. They'd even made the national press. The Avengers had helped plan a small demo for the day after the election, but so many people were angry after their defeat that 100 protesters came out on the Lewiston streets, and the small die-in they'd planned was converted into a spontaneous march. 6 people were arrested, including 2 Avengers, and a lesbian teacher who picked that day to come out. The cops were awful, but the demonstrators scored a photo in the New York Times. Local queers felt energized, so did the roving Avengers. Their faces positively glowed as they talked about their work. Laconic Sarah Pursley actually seemed ready to burst. They'd learned a lot, toughened up. It's easy to develop a stance against your enemies, but not against your quote unquote friends who seem to hate loudmouth queers in the streets even more than the homophobes in the state house. It was a lesson we'd all have to learn. When the New Orleans Avengers publicized a photo of a lesbian couple kissing, the queer establishment there denounced the quote unquote radical Avengers for undoing all their slow, patient, semi closeted work. There were also conflicts in New York where activists and lobbyists were duking it out over how to celebrate the 25th anniversary of Stonewall. The official organizers seemed to be turning it into a big self congratulatory celebration of how much they'd accomplished, and a chance to dress up in suits and ties and talk about their favorite word, equality, as if it solved everything. Others wanted confrontation. Queers were still dying of AIDS. We were still being beaten and raped and killed. For groups like the Avengers and ACT UP, the Stonewall anniversary was a call to remember our revolutionary roots as a liberation movement. The whole thing sparked by street kids, rent boys, and drag queens and butches who finally got sick of being hauled off by the cops, raiding gay bars, and set the village on fire. Who was right? Could we coexist? Kafka thought activists were always doomed. Quote, they rule the streets, and that makes them think they rule the world. They are mistaken. Behind them stand the secretaries, officials, and professional politicians, all the modern sultans for whom they are preparing the way to power. End quote. Was Beatrix here? Yo, Beatrix, I didn't answer your email, but I meant to. I was gonna send you a video of me and my roommate playing music because you mentioned it. I will answer your email probably eventually. Okay. That is the end of chapter 12. Um, do you guys want me to read another chapter, or should I wrap this up and start a matchbox? Let's do the matchbox. I keep having thoughts on how to do a matchbox, like which is supposed to be a soapbox but tiny. Um, and I just never do it. Like I think if I just start doing it, then I'll be able to do it. I was thinking matchboxes can kind of be more spontaneous and just like if I find um like a matchbox is going to be soapbox light. It's going to be a short and tiny one topic and less than an hour. That's my thought on how I'm going to do it. Okay. So I'm going to wrap this up. We just finished chapter 12. So next on Wednesday, it's going to start. We're going to start with chapter 13. I scheduled the live stream. So please, please, please go to my channel and click set reminder for all the live streams that are pre-scheduled. Okay. I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going to start another live stream. And I'll see you guys in like, well, actually, I'm going to go pee too. So it's going to be like 2 minutes. Okay. Okay. See you all there in a minute. Bye.